Hey everyone, welcome back. So in this lesson, we are going to start with the idea of some standard time, jazz time, and our jazz pattern between our ride cymbal and our hi-hat foot. And we're going to talk predominantly also about the idea of jazz independence on the snare drum. Now, the term independence means your limbs or limb being independent of something that's staying steady. In this case, our steady pattern is our consistent jazz time pattern. And I'm going to play that for you right away. Now, you may have heard this before. Some of you have played it already, but we just want to make sure that we are playing the right thing and we have the right idea in mind. So here is your standard jazz time pattern. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now notice I'm playing in the body of the ride here. I'm not on the bell. I do have heel up in my left foot. I'm playing heel up. I'm not playing heel down. There is an old pattern that was used in big band where people roll their foot back and forth. So they sort of come down on 1 and 3 and up to their toe on 2 and 4. That's still used and it's fine. People like that rocking pattern in their left foot. But I have a tendency to want to use heel up to get a good snap in the left foot, especially if you're playing more in a small band context and not really a big band context. I'm also accenting a little bit more on 2 and 4 with my ride hand, so notice that. There are some different places you could put those accents, but that's a good place to start, especially when you're working on independence. And also please know that your ride is going to move around. It's not going to always be on this constant pattern. However, the first series of lessons you want to go through, you want to keep this pattern constant against the independence of the snare drum, and that's where we're going to start working on now. Now, it's suggested to kind of stay away from a lot of downbeat playing in jazz. You want more of a syncopated or an upbeat or a weak beat of the measure type of roll in your surfaces or limbs that are going to be playing more melodious against the pattern. So we're talking about the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and a variety of those combinations. You can start with some downbeat work if you have never really worked any jazz independence. So for the first exercise here, I'm just going to play straight quarter notes on the snare drum against the time pattern so you can hear how that sounds, and you could just sort of brush up on that first before we get to the syncopated figures. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, again, that's simply really kind of a independence exercise just to sort of get your hand or your surface going with this. But I would have a tendency to stay away from the constant quarter note thing, especially a lot of downbeats, because jazz is not very heavy on, not just downbeats, but downbeat of 1. Jazz is not very heavy on the downbeat of 1 of each measure. It's more the ands, especially an and of 4. So I'm going to run through all the different ands that are a possibility right now. Let's start with the and of 1. Now, before we actually enact that, I want to make a point that when you're playing your jazz ride pattern, the 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, those ands on the jazz ride pattern are notes we refer to as skip notes. And those skip notes on the ands fall on the and of 2 and the and of 4. So any other surface that you're playing an and on that has to do with the independence, you should think about where it does or doesn't line up with the ride. So anything on the and of 1 and the and of 3 don't line up with the ride. And anything on the and of 2 and the and of 4 line up with the ride. So you're going to hear that as we go through this exercise. So we're going to start with the and of 1, and you'll hear how that doesn't line up with the ride. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm going to move to the and of 2, and that's one of the notes that does line up with the ride. It's that first skip note with the ride. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Moving on to the and of 3, it's the same scenario as the and of 1, misses the skip note or does not line up with the ride. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And finally, moving on to the and of 4, lines up with the last note of the ride. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And just a good exercise to put together for yourself would be all of these ands consecutively, one after another, with the jazz ride pattern, all right? And that would sound like this. Play it a little slower first, then I'll play it up to tempo. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And a little faster up to tempo. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now keep in mind, this is just the very beginnings of independence on the snare. There's so many exercises that you can work on. If you keep the stress on the ands, it's a little bit more conditioned for the right language for jazz. But there is a lot of combinations between different positionings of the ands and combinations, mixes of quarter notes and ands, that sort of thing. A great place to start is the Syncopation book by Ted Reed, starting on around, page 30, certainly moving up to page 38 and up to page 45, where there's exercises one after the other of melodies where you could put on your left hand against the constant time pattern. Another book is Modern Reading Text in 4/4 by Louis Belson. Same kind of idea, a lot of mixes of ands and quarter notes, and it'll really get that independence going between your left hand and or I should say your snare hand and the time pattern. Now, as we go through these lessons, I'm going to show you some more independence and some different surfaces we could use against this pattern. Stay tuned.